And is there sound now? My brother, will he tell me? Sound. My mom said no sound working. Okay, did we start this again? Yay. Sound? Anyone? Give me a thumbs up. Anyone out there listening? Anyone? Hello, 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 hello. Is there anybody out there? Anyways, I'm going to keep talking. So, did you hear what I said? I don't know. Wonderful. Let's start this again. Ready? Hello, mothers. Are you concerned about your children's health? Of course, you're concerned about your children's health. What kind of question is that, Adam? Huh, right. Anyways, as I am living in this interesting human experience now, I want to give you two different ideas. Okay, we have a germ theory, which is what's been going on for 100 years now. The idea of the germ theory is that germs are the primary causal agents for illness and disease. Okay, so we need to build up defenses. We need to guard ourselves against germs. We can be attacked. This is fear. It's not fun. It's what we're living in right now. Now, we also have a theory that's been around since that, even before, I would assume, before science came into the picture, the terrain theory. Now, the terrain theory talks about the idea that health comes from within and disease comes from within. So, in order to create health, you need to have balance in your life. Now, my question for you is, one is killing germs and being afraid and fear, and another one is creating life where you're actually living in joy and happiness. And my question is, which would you rather believe in? I know for me, which one I'd rather believe in personally. And I got to tell you that this is how I grew up. I grew up around terrain theory. I haven't known any different aside from just watching what other people are doing. And I have to tell you also, I have seen amazing things happen based on this idea of terrain theory. Amazing things, things that the germ theory has not been able to accomplish. So, today my question is this to you, and I want people to think about this. I'm not here to convince anyone, and I'm not here to be convinced either. So, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts as you think back historically? Grandma, great grandma, things like that. There was a point in time when you got sick, and grandma would make you chicken soup, and the main ingredient was love, and grandma took care of you. And then there was a point in time where maybe it was your mom as you grew up when you got sick. She told you you had to go to the doctor. So at what point did things change? When did we stop learning that we could take care of ourselves? So once again, different questions. I have to tell you that, let me double check something really quickly. Today, my guest is, I'm extremely excited and thrilled to have my guest here today. And do you know anything about astrology? And there's something called Mercury in retrograde. If you know about this, you're laughing and you're thinking, uh-oh, what's going on? So my guest today, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, is not here. Yay. So, boo. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Maybe it was 1 p.m. Eastern as he is on the East Coast. So I'm going to talk for a bit in hopes that he jumps on. If not, oh, look, and he just jumped on. Andrew Kaufman is ready to join the broadcast. Cool. All right, so it's coming up. As he's about to join, then, once again, the idea here too is to talk about terrain theory and to, make you think about it. Ideally, if we can show examples. Terrain theory is all around us. And like I said, the things I've seen, things that germ theory has not been able to accomplish. We all know someone that's had cancer, has cancer. At the same time, there's a lot of people that people know that do not have cancer. And as I talk to people and realize this is part of my world too, as I talk to people that I know or come across that have had cancer, past tense, the majority of them went through a natural experience in order to get to where they are. So in other words, it wasn't necessarily that it was all about the chemotherapy and the radiation. Talk to people. If you know people that have gone through things like this, it's just interesting to me. I'm curious I'm interested in people talking to sources firsthand to see what's really going on there. And I just think it's interesting observing human nature. You know, I have had 2 people recently I talked to about cancer, that they had cancer. They went initially to hospital and they got tests, and there's the tests that say cancer, and they go do a natural thing, and eventually they go back to the hospital and they get their tests and they say there's no cancer. And both of these people said the hospital had no interest or didn't even ask what they did to be cancer free. Once again, food for thought. I really want to plant seeds today. So with all that being said, yes, my guest today, Dr. Andrew Kaufman. I'll bring him on in just a moment. I want to tell you a little bit about his background. I'm thrilled to have him here today. He's a natural healing consultant, inventor, public speaker, forensic psychiatrist, and expert witness. That, to me, I think is really cool in the midst of all this. He completed his psychiatric training at Duke University Medical Center after graduating from the Medical University of South Carolina, and has a Bachelor of Science from MIT in molecular biology. This is awesome. These are scientists that we're talking to here. And for my friends from high school and elementary school and college, maybe you thought I was a little silly as I talked about these natural things. I have some really interesting friends I want to introduce you to, as far as doctors and scientists from around the world. And yes, I am silly, but I'm also healthy. So Dr. Kaufman has conducted and published original research and lectured, supervised, and mentored medical students, residents, and fellows in all psychiatric specialties. He has been qualified as an expert witness in local, state, and federal courts. He has held leadership positions in academic medicine and professional organizations. He ran a startup company to develop a medical device he invented and patented. So as I bring Dr. Kaufman on, I actually have a surprise guest. For those of you that have been involved in my world, here's a hero of mine. Okay, he hasn't been around in a while, and he's got something to say for a moment. So I would like to introduce you to Dr. Harvey Bigelsen, my father, and let's hear what he has to say. Oh, and we can hear no sound, can we? Let's try that one more time. And I love technology. It makes life easier and harder all at the same time. So, anyone hearing sound on your end from my father's video? No? Okay. All right. I'm going to try the solo on this real quick. Nope, solo off. Nothing. No sound. All right. We'll talk about Mercury in retrograde in another moment or so also. So, what my father is saying here, I will say for him. Bum, bum, bum. I will try to bring him onto the picture again because I wanted to introduce him to Dr. Kaufman. What my father is saying is Western medicine has been controlled since 1910 by the germ theory, when Rockefeller came into the picture. And I love this. If you have problems with this, go ahead and talk to my dad about it. Been controlled since 1910. And the truth of the matter is they have not found the cause or cure of one chronic disease in the last 100 years. So what makes them experts? And I love it when my dad says this. He'll say, if you have a transmission problem with your car and your mechanic has never fixed a transmission, would you take your car to him? Would you listen to his expert advice? What my father says is these are not experts. The germ theory of disease has been a 100-year failure. Now, I know that's a little intense to say, so let's bring on an expert, isn't that funny, to talk about these things, okay? So without further ado, dun, 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 Dr. Kaufman coming onto the stream. Hello, Dr. Andrew Kaufman. Can you hear me on your side today?
Yes, I can. It's great to see you. Thanks for
Oh,
having
you know
me.
what's interesting? Hold on one moment, because I can't hear you on my side.
Oh, no.
Oh, I love technology.
Hopefully the audience can hear me.
If you guys can hear, I'm hoping you can hear Andrew, Dr. Andrew. And I'm going to change one more thing. And let's do built-in speakers and changing my microphone, my headphones. Dr. Kaufman, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
And can I hear you? No.
Oh, well, I'm coming through in my monitor.
God, gotta love this. Hold on one more moment if you're there, Doctor. And?
Well, at least the audience hears us both, even if you don't hear me.
That's hilarious. Built-in microphone. Huh. I heard a test sound. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to try one other thing. My system preferences. Oh, everyone can hear both of us. That's awesome. The problem is, for those of you that are listening, I cannot hear Dr. Kaufman at all. Headphone port. Oh, wait, I hear sound. Dr. Kaufman, are you there?
Yes,
Yay!
that's me. All right.
All right. I love life.
Nice work. You have to be your own engineer, don't you?
Oh my God. And I'm a musician and a sound engineer, so I'm all about the technology. It's wonderful when it doesn't work for me. I know what I'm doing. All right, Dr. Kaufman, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing exceptionally well, and thank you for inviting me on.
Good. My pleasure to have you here today. And yeah, I wanted you to hear that little video from my dad so you can get a chance to meet him for a second. You know, and my intention here with you today is terrain theory. You know, you've been doing the rounds and getting some real recognition, which is awesome for what's going on with COVID these days. And terrain theory is coming into your picture. And I got to tell you that your video was the first one that was sent to me as things started to get kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And there were a few videos that were sent to me and my brother, and people were saying, do you know these people? They're saying what you're saying. And, you know, our followers were thrilled because they've never heard anyone else say these things. So it's kind of like, oh, yay, brothers. Besides the fact someone said if I put on glasses, we look like brothers, which I thought was funny. But then as these things went on, you know, I'm trying to educate myself and connect with people. And terrain theory, I want people to hear the term more and more. And the nice thing is people are starting to hear that. So your video actually came to me through a friend in Spain. So your stuff is getting around, which I think is awesome. And I really want nothing more than to connect people. There's a community of people like us that are there that have been divided and conquered, I think, over time. And now it's time for us to regroup. And in the midst of the pandemic experience, it's a perfect time for us to do this, you know, to connect, to create bridges and develop this really stable foundation. So as time goes on and the wool is lifted back, we're there ready for people. So with all that being said, topics. Wow. My initial question is...
I have a couple of things to say, if you don't mind, actually.
Oh, no, not at all. Please jump in anytime.
Well, firstly, I just want to say that while I really appreciate your introduction, I want people to know that I don't really consider myself an expert on any one particular thing aside from forensic psychiatry. But nonetheless, we don't need to rely on experts because these are things that we can all understand and we can all learn about. And I do try to research things and present this information the way I see it, but I always encourage people to look at the material themselves and decide. But I consider myself more of a student of terrain theory because it's been relatively recent that I've gone down this research path. And it was sort of the culmination of a long-term study of the allopathic health system, where I was basically, through my firsthand experience as a physician, was seeing the failures of what I was taught to do. And then as I began to do more research, I saw that not only was medicine not offering any cures, they were actually responsible for probably the leading cause of death in the nation. And when I finally got down to looking at germ theory, looking at the scientific experiments behind it, looking at the historical perspective and the scandals like around Pasteur, I understood that it was basically built on very, very shaky science. And subsequently, there were lots of experiments that disproved germ theory. And even the germ theorists themselves couldn't meet their own test to prove that germs cause particular illnesses. So, of course, much of the science that actually kind of nullified the germ theory was the foundation of terrain theory. So when you sent me this book that your dad wrote, which I have started reading, and I really enjoying it so far, I saw right in there a reference to all of the scientists that I had become familiar with in this. And then I realized, oh, this book is really about terrain theory. And I was really excited about this interview because I see this as you do as being a key moment, in the course of human health, where we have this opportunity to really change the paradigm. And all of it is rooted in germ theory. All of the treatments that are not helping and that cause harm are really all rooted in this kind of warfare germ theory paradigm. And so it's really my main mission in what I'm doing and speaking out is to provide all of the information to overturn this paradigm in human health completely, because treatments based on natural healing, which is based on terrain theory, are actually effective and do cure illnesses.
Nice. I think it's awesome. As I put my solo on, sorry. Okay, technology. I think that's wonderful. And as I listened to you and even looked into who you are, the forensic experience. My dad's hero was Sherlock Holmes, and he considered himself a medical detective. So he was an eye surgeon, and he was rich, and he was not happy. He was not helping people. And at some point, a psychic came into the picture, which he didn't really believe in, and introduced him to the work of Edgar Cayce. And same thing, my dad's a scientist. So he looks into this and he thinks, you know what, something's going on here. He had a patient come to him for a consultation, said, thanks for your input, went to someone else, and they did something naturally and fixed this person. So my dad was interested. What happened? And he went and learned about this technique. And what he did was that another patient, came in a little later with the same problem. So my dad used this new technique and fixed this person. That person had been to 5 other doctors who could not fix her. So when that person was fixed, was thrilled and ran to all those doctors and said, I'm better. And every one of those doctors turned my father into the medical board. Okay.
Wow.
And it's interesting. There's books we have. The Holographic Blood book is an awesome book. It's written in a way that anyone can read it, which I think is awesome. He also has this one, which we haven't publicized much recently, Medical Conspiracy in America. We have documentation that the United States government, during medical trials or trials against my father, who was brought up on charges of curing someone illegally. So they said they did not care if the person got better. Right?
Wow. That's actually a law on the books.
It was cured. He was cured by illegal means. Okay.
I see.
And then the other one was he was brought up on charges of illegible handwriting. I mean, as a child, I had horrible handwriting. My teachers would say something, and I would say, "My dad's a doctor," and they would laugh. The judge would laugh at that stuff. So, in the end, it's we've seen things happen that were awesome. My dad did his own research. He looked into Edgar Cayce, and he found some things out. And Edgar Cayce, people, if you don't know, look him up. The Sleeping Prophet. He was America's most prolific psychic. Famous people went to him. He would go to sleep into a trance. His wife would take notes, and he would come up with these medical recommendations that worked. Okay, so this is wooey, but this is not also, if it works. If you told me 100% of the people with cancer get their pinky cut off and their cancer goes away, when I get cancer, I'd say cut my pinky off. I wouldn't ask any questions, right? So I appreciate you asking questions and looking into these things. My dad, as he says, the germ theory is a 100-year failure, not cure or cause of one chronic disease in 100 years. I know he looked into this. I'm not a medical professional. I'm a wellness educator, and I'm a music teacher. So I'm here to translate information as best as possible into small, digestible chunks. So my question here for you is, at what point, out of curiosity, at what point did you start to investigate something different? Was there something that happened in your career that made you just look kind of outside that box?
Well, I think there really were many different things, but there was one time when I was in my residency training at Duke, and we had this evidence-based medicine seminar where every week we met and we discussed scientific papers. And actually we kind of rotated among us, like someone was responsible for analyzing it and presenting it as, in a certain format that we could use to scrutinize it. Right. And during one of these meetings, maybe it was in my 3rd year out of 4 years there was a paper that had used the Freedom of Information Act to get unpublished data from the FDA about some antidepressants that were approved. And then this data was combined with the published data and reanalyzed. And the finding was essentially that there was no difference between the drugs and the placebo in terms of benefit. So it was quite shocking, right?
I was going to say, I think that's so important right there. There's no difference between the drugs and the placebo.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. For antidepressant drugs that we looked at in this study.
Cool.
And so, we had spent, I had spent the last couple of years basically being told to prescribe these medications, for every case of depression, really, and for other things. And so here's this study that shows that it's not even a real drug, right? And so I was expecting that after that, they were going to make a big announcement and tell us we're no longer prescribing these drugs. Right?
Surprise, surprise.
And, well, that is exactly nothing of the sort happened, or even remotely so, even though everyone at the meeting agreed that we should really question using these drugs from this point forward. Right. But then it went back to business as usual. And then after that, there was another thing related to antidepressants. Actually, there were two other things I should mention, because really adding all these things up, it had a lot of significance. So one other one was, and this was earlier on, that they made this big announcement that Duke researchers had found a gene mutation in a serotonin gene, right? Because they say that these antidepressants work on serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, a chemical in the brain that sends signals. And so they had this large database, I think it was from nursing homes, and they found this association with a gene and depression. And so they were super excited because this would be the first actual scientific proof of any biological cause of depression, especially related to the drugs, which were all around influencing serotonin. So it was like celebration time. Everyone was super happy and, felt the sort of Duke name growing, and they were all happy about that. And then just a few days later, it turns out that the whole thing was debunked. It was just basically an anomaly because they were mining data and looking for things and found things that weren't there. So, it's like big disappointment, but, it was hush hush after that. No one really spoke about it.
Interesting.
And then the third thing was that the FDA issued a black box warning, which is their strongest warning for a drug, saying that it's dangerous in some way. And they issued this for antidepressants in children, saying that it increased suicidal behavior. And it was kind of weird that they put it that way, actually, because normally we think about like suicide risk, or we think about thoughts of suicide, or we think about suicide attempts. Right. So the suicidal behavior was a little bit vague.
Gotcha.
But the attitude of the department was that we should schedule a follow-up appointment or have a phone call within a few days of starting the antidepressant to make sure they weren't thinking about killing themselves. Okay. And then we would basically protect our liability, but we shouldn't really worry about it because it's not really a real thing.
Okay.
And, we should still prescribe antidepressants to everyone. So, these three things, you could see that they're basically not accepting reality or science. They're just doing what they're doing and then basically ignoring things that would take the justification away from it, right? And then they're exalting things that would add justification to it.
Right.
So that's not science. That's kind of, it's dogma. Really is what it is. And so that was the first clue. And it was really frustrating while I was still at my training, because I had people looking over my shoulder, and if I didn't do the expected thing, then I would get, either compelled to do it or criticized or, get a scolding, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So later on, I was much more conservative at first with any prescription. And then I started taking people off medicines. And eventually, like when I was the last couple of years, I was still doing conventional practice. I was just taking everyone off all the medications. There was only one medication really in all of psychiatry that was useful.
Interesting.
And it wasn't even a psychiatric medicine. It's a blood pressure medicine.
Oh,
so,
isn't that
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That makes sense though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because those psychiatric medicines are really just sedatives or way of making you have numb emotions, so you're less bothered by any distress, but they don't get to any underlying cause or any,
Right.
They don't really improve people's lives. They're just a distraction. I mean, it's almost the same as if you were using alcohol or cannabis or other drugs to just take away the pain and distract you from it.
Yes, exactly. Interesting. That's cool. I appreciate that. It's as you talk, a couple notes I've taken, but I remember Dad saying, he said this a lot. He said the first year of medical school, he was taught what a normal body was, and the second year what an abnormal body was, and he was never taught how one became the other. And he also said he would ask questions, and they would say, read the book. And he would say, I think the book is wrong. Now books have been changed over time, and I always thought that doctors are scientists and that they're always looking and exploring. But the reality is, it's not really happening that way. The ones that explore and experiment, they eventually get pushed to the side and attacked. And my dad ended up on Quack Watch, which is where all the good doctors end up. There's a crowd of people that they go, oh yeah, I looked up your dad, found him on Quack Watch, so I knew he was something good.
Right. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you found me on there.
It's welcome to the club when it happens, right? But there's a couple things too. Science to me is interesting. My brother and I went to Spain. We got invited to lecture. It was awesome. We had more people show up than ever. The Spanish people were thrilled. Doctors, scientists, yay. We got to be on a round table. And at one point, a well-known scientist said, we need to be scientists like the Bigelsens. And then we have a translator in my ear. And I said, did he just call us scientists? He said, they've done something over time and observed patterns. And those patterns are replicable. And for me, thinking about what makes sense to people, 1 + 1 is 2. I love when you did on your initial Humanity as a Virus, the multiple choice. Let's let people think, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? How do people come up with those conclusions? How can we guide people to those conclusions? Okay. So let's get into that a little bit. The idea that you have been educated, gone to school to help people. There are doctors in my mind, this is what they want to do. I had some friends in high school, they want to just be rich and drive a Porsche and golf on Wednesdays. But most people I know that are doctors want to help people. So the thing is, their teaching hasn't helped them do that. And I'm not throwing everything under the bus here. Western medicine, trauma surgeons, awesome. Your paramedics, the nurses, and Dad, when he did his cancer work in Mexico in the 90s, which he got well known for, he was using low dose targeted radiation, which was illegal in the United States at that point, and supporting the body naturally and holistically. His patients wouldn't lose their hair. I mean, there's many of them alive today. And interesting enough, they get their cancer, they work with Dad, there's no more cancer, and their friends aren't even really interested. They get kicked out of the breast cancer club, and things like that. So how do we navigate this? How do we show the average person in a way that's somewhat undeniable? Terrain theory is everywhere. If I show these pictures, you've got this here, the germ theory, the terrain theory. The idea that we can vaccinate the fish or we can clean up the water. If I get to my pictures here, and I did have that at the bottom of the graphic, but I didn't want to put that in there too much. This, Josh and I, my brother and I, we were in Spain, and as we were there, these are the small farms they have, the fincas, and we met the regenerative agriculture people. We had no idea this was going on here. So this green farm is using the regenerative agriculture experience. Everything else is you're tilling the soil, and I don't know what to say, but your standard agriculture these days. There's your glyphosate, okay? Here's your Roundup and all this stuff here. So the question we asked when we saw this was, how is it that this person's farm is okay when it's surrounded by poison? Okay, this farm over here, it's uphill. So when it gets watered, the poison is coming down into the terrain here. So as we asked the person the question, the person said, my terrain, my soil is too strong. So awesome, beautiful. The question then here is, in your perspective, from your knowledge, expertise, how can we show people the terrain theory without it being questioned. I know that if you look at a botany book, if the soil is out of balance, the plant is unhealthy. Like, that's basic botany. The fish, every child knows, if the fish tank is out of balance, it's not healthy for the fish. Our terrain has been so compromised, it's amazing. Talking with Eileen and talking about all these frequencies around us, there's stuff going on. So how can we tell people? How can we show people? What do you think? You have some thoughts on that?
Well, yes, of course, and it's definitely not an easy task to overcome, because the roots of germ theory are really ingrained in us since almost at birth, because we are told, right, that we can pass germs, we should cover our mouth and nose when we cough and sneeze, and stay away from sick people in the household because they can get us sick or we can get them sick. Right. So these things are so ingrained and reinforced over the lifetime. I think it's very, very difficult to challenge. And I don't think it's possible to convince anyone by presenting like a scientific or rational argument. I think it has to hit them in some kind of emotional way. And I actually am embarking on a project right now that's going to take a couple of years, but to try and achieve that, which is to create a documentary film talking about basically the faults of germ theory and why it's not accurate and how it's caused us so much harm, and present the model of terrain theory as a way forward. That I think, one thing about it that will really attract people is that they can understand there is really a known cause of illness, and that they have full control over reversing that cause and regaining their health. And right now, they don't have that at all. So I think it has to be about empowering people to realize that they can restore themselves to health. Perhaps they need professionals, like you mentioned, some very good types of professionals to provide them the information and guide them or help them see what's going on specifically in their body. But essentially, the full power and control of overcoming that and returning to a state of health is completely within their control.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oops, as I come back here, sorry. Having technological difficulties. Okay. It's interesting as you say that too, because in my mind, what I'm here to do is educate and empower people so they can learn to take charge of their own healthcare. And that's not good business, unfortunately, for the Western medicine experience. And that's why I think Dad ended up getting in trouble. Is Dad was pretty loud. He was a fighter, which is, it needed to be done. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make friends and share information with people. Documentary, I think that's awesome. For people listening, and I have learned to ask. So people listening, someone contact us and let's get together and start working on a documentary. There's a lot of people out there. Share the information, please. Okay, we can definitely change things. And you're right, it'll take some time. At this point too, it's a good time for us to think about this and to do some research. And if you're afraid of your health, for your health, right now, the whole world knows there's nothing more valuable than your health. And people are in different spaces because of this. So people do some research, look into these things and find the good information. The idea that measles, the whole measles and the $100,000, everyone thinks it's contagious, and it hasn't been proven. Okay, for the average person listening to this, measles has never been proven that it is contagious. Even in the court of law, they defended that. I read about the HIV one, that the guy offered $5 million. I can tell you this real quick. My dad lectured with a guy in the 80s or 90s who people didn't get the terrain theory idea. HIV was big. He would ask for a volunteer that was HIV positive in the audience. He would stick that person with a needle, and he would stick himself with a needle. And he never got the virus. He never got the symptoms. As we know, maybe we can all be tested. I heard this, maybe from you or someone. If we're all tested, 40% of us can test right now positive for HIV because of what's in our DNA, RNA. So what are people thinking? Documentaries. There's good information. There's the simple things of, do you know someone who's such a happy person, who's happy all the time, and they don't get sick? Huh. That's interesting. I feel like these are little things, do you know people who don't get sick? What do they do? I have one friend, he does jujitsu. He's a mixed martial arts instructor. He's awesome. He's a former vegetarian from days way past when my dad said, your imbalance is because you eat meat. And that doesn't mean that's for everybody, but he's awesome. So at this point, I asked him, I said, dude, do you ever get sick? And he said, no. He's got a dojo with people that teach. I said, do your teachers ever cancel because they're sick? He said, no. I said, students? He said, no. I said, and jujitsu is a way of life. Like this is something that's been passed down from a long period of time, and there's mind, body, spirit. Yeah. Do you think that has anything to do with his health? I mean, to me, it seems obvious. So I want to support people that are doing these things. For you personally, have you seen, are there any things in particular you've seen since you started to investigate things that are just good examples of Turing theory in action?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I studied natural healing techniques, and mostly I was just learning because, it's not like there's just a bunch of textbooks that you can go and find, right, or a standardized curriculum that lays everything out the way it does for allopathic medicine. So I was also, coming from this background actually was very helpful because I already know the mainstream, theory about illness and about anatomy and physiology and all those aspects. And I know the human body, and I've seen lots of people with illness. Mm-hmm. So when I started studying this, I didn't really understand the mechanism of how things work until after I already learned about what things work for what types of conditions. And in fact, I'm still learning, because there's a lot of things that are really not unknown, because since all of the medical paradigm has been based in germ theory, all of the research funding has been looking at experiments only in that area. So there's not much there's definitely some research, right? Like I think you're familiar with Enderlein and Naissans and Béchamp, right? But yes. It's nowhere near the volume of information that's available in conventional, medicine or the standard allopathic model of disease. But various conditions I realized were, responding to changes in the terrain. Like, some simple examples like herpes outbreaks, right? Where people get little blisters around their mouth or sometimes in their genitals. And by having people supplement with collagen-rich foods to build up the structure of their skin, they stop having those outbreaks. Right. Because what those outbreaks are is that they're not caused by a virus. They are simply your body has toxic materials in it that it can't get rid of. And perhaps because of a weakness in your skin, it brings them to your skin, and they damage the tissue there and basically erupt through the skin to exit the body ultimately, right? Mm-hmm. And so by providing the raw materials to replenish the deficiency in the skin, then the skin can get stronger and thicker, then the body will no longer deposit the toxins there. Of course, the body will find another place and will cause other problems, right, if there's no easy exit out.
Yes.
And I realized that actually, almost all of the clients that have come to me who have had illness, that toxicity is a major component. And basically the terrain can't work properly with excessive toxicity, right? And then when it gets into a chronic condition, then you have excessive staying around of the microbes that come to do their saprophytic role of cleaning up and repairing. And sometimes these actually, in nasty cases, or when the toxin is a heavy metal, it involves other kinds of parasites, like worms, for example.
Right. Right. And it's interesting too, as you say that, we always talked about the idea that there's invasive parasites, so tapeworms, leishmaniasis, things like this. The reality is, if my brother and I eat food and something like that we ingest, if I'm healthy, there's no food for it in my system, it comes out the other end. Whereas if he's unhealthy, it stays there and it has a feast. Parasites, Dad, it was interesting too. My brother would fish with my father, and My brother would get bit by mosquitoes, and my father would not. So why is that? Because the mosquito lands on a swamp. It lands where there's toxicity. My brother would say, "What's going on, Dad?" And my dad would say, "Well, it's a swamp. Mosquito lands on a swamp. You see the river? It flows." This whole idea of disease cannot exist where there's no stagnation. You have stagnation, things build up. And for us, it was about Rudolf Steiner's 4 bodies. We can have physical blockages, energetic blockages, emotional blockages, or spiritual, which is a belief experience. Okay. The idea, one of Dad's famous quotes, that health is simple, but people are complicated, was a big one for us. When you start to observe things, you start to see these things. The idea of autoimmune, that the body is never going to attack itself. It's striving for balance. The body wants balance. That's what it's working on. And have you looked into homotoxicology at all? Have you checked on that?
No, I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, Dr. Kaufman, woohoo! So we're going to get you a team T-shirt, okay? Team symbiosis is what we're all about here. Yes, there's some really, really cool patterns that are really easy to see when you start to put these puzzle pieces together. So I'm excited for you because you've really found some cool pieces and you've got a few more to go. The Holographic Blood book that you got from us puts a lot of those pieces together. And what I think is nice is a lot of people have pieces to this puzzle. It's a question of bringing them together. Like Eileen talked about, there's this and there's this, and no one's looking at a big picture, okay? This is one unit and it works together. And I'm excited for you because you're gonna find a whole wealth of information to jump into. And I do have people I want to introduce you to as well. At this point, my dad's goal was to create an international research foundation without walls. And some of my friends, I have some research scientists. My one friend was just here. I was going to introduce her to you. She just disappeared. I have a friend in Spain who has collected and compiled lost knowledge and information and has books that he's doing. Brilliant people. You mentioned water. You're interested in water. My friend Mishiko Hayashi, Dr. Emoto's niece, the director of the Emoto Peace Project, would love to chat with you. So let's get you involved in the Japanese experience.
Yeah, no, Dr. Emoto's work is something that's really blown me away.
It's neat stuff. And here's the thing, skeptics, I appreciate skeptics, okay? We are skeptics. We're show me skeptics, not the jerk skeptics that just want to, poop on everything. There's wonderful stuff out there. And at this point, what we can do is strengthen this network and really start to put some research together. There is good information. If we can compile it, because a lot of it has been lost, then we can really cover some good ground when people are ready. And I do think right now, there's a lot of people on the fence. They're not sure what to believe. And right now they've been pushed to a point where they're trying to figure things out. I know people personally, and all of a sudden they're into terrain, their family thinks they're crazy. But it's like they took the red pill, they get it, it makes sense to them. You can't look back when you see these things and you understand it. The bridges also, this is an interesting one. Where's my phone? I looked up a couple things. Western acknowledged energy theories or practices. The placebo effect has been proven. This is the mind, okay? So our thoughts can do things to us. Qigong is considered medicine in the East. Acupuncture has been around for 5,000 years, and people still think it's weird. I have a relative, we're all from back east New York, which is funny. And one of my relatives, as we were visiting, has a health issue. It's been going on for years. We looked at her blood. She was like, "Oh, entertained, cool." And she said, "I did something crazy. I was willing to try anything. And I thought about you guys. I did something so crazy. I went to see this acupuncturist." And I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." He's this old guy in Chinatown, and I don't know, it's amazing. He doesn't speak English, and he put herbs on my back, and I feel great. And all I can think is, cool, that's crazy. That's amazing. They're doing the kidney stones with sound. So this is vibration and frequency, right? So these type of ideas, it's kind of the same thing, different perspective. I'll bring my friend on in a moment, but I looked this up last night. The definition for vaccine: a substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or several diseases, prepared from the causative agent of a disease. Okay, so they're giving us something from this disease to stimulate something in our body. Then I looked up the definition of, well, and wait a second, isn't there, oh, that was funny. I typed this up last night. I was getting all these brain flashes last night late. Homeopathy. What's the definition of homeopathy? What's a homeopathic? Where'd my definition go? Here, definition. Oh, come on. How's homeopathy? How does it work? Slightly diluted substances which practitioners claim can cause the body to heal itself. So they're giving us natural substances to stimulate our own body's immune system. Isn't that the same idea?
Absolutely, and I've actually pretty much sure that I've said that, especially with Jenner's cowpox vaccine. But yeah, it is the same exact idea.
Okay, so, and it was funny because there was one other thing that I took a note on last night, and I guess it was too late and it didn't get onto my page. That's pretty funny. So, okay, we have exosomes then too, and we have viruses. And for people that are into science, let's study the exosomes and let's look at this, okay? Let's not fight and let's be symbiotic. Let's study this and let's evolve, okay? If this is a threat to your revenue stream, I'm sorry. At the same time, what is it really? I think it's perspective in a way. So I have a friend, Dr. Ana Maria Oliva from Spain. I want to bring her on in a moment. And she's been on with some amazing people. She's a PhD in biomedicine. She has a master's in biomedical engineering. She's a research scientist. She's worked with devices and clinics and people. And she's now involved with a lot of scientists that maybe you should be involved with too, that are trying to figure out how to navigate 5G, vaccines, and what's going on. Now, she shows this picture. Look at that for a moment, people. What side are you on right now? And realize if we're all in this together, there's not supposed to be sides here. So can we walk around a little bit, okay? Can we just take a moment to observe what's going on here? What do you think about something like this picture?
Well, it's an inversion, and that's really apropos because what we've seen in all of these areas where the mainstream paradigm has been harmful in some way, I think it's all involves some inversion of meaning, right? Like the word germ itself actually has an inverted meaning because the common meaning that we think about is an invader that makes us sick, right? So it's an invading enemy. Right. But actually what germ means is a new growth or budding, right? When you germinate a seed, when you have a germ cell, that's the new life. Germ means new life. So we've completely inverted the meaning to mean, you know, invader that makes us dead, right? Wow. So it's like from life to death. And there is example after example of that. And I think that cartoon illustrates it quite nicely.
I really, you know, for me, that's the thing to connect with our average person. And, you know, for people listening, I talked to a chiropractor recently. He said, you know, the people he talks to, wearing masks or not, everyone that he talks to does not believe in this. Okay, but what we're hearing is the loud few. And I really feel like as time goes on, the evidence, if you're doing the math, it's pointing to a different direction. And it's pointing to a direction that empowers people and should make them feel good. You know, if you're afraid, I really feel for you. And I understand that people are confused. It's been 100 years that this has been going on. Someone told me recently they watched an episode of Rawhide, and in the episode, smallpox, and there's a vaccine. And they show everyone lined up down the street to get herbs. No one's going to the guy for the vaccine, right? So I want to bring on Dr. Ana Maria Oliva to chat with us for a moment. And I really do think as people listen, you look at the 6 or the 9, okay? You listen to the idea that people haven't been able to prove measles is contagious. There's money on the line there. There was $5 million on the line for someone to prove HIV was contagious. No one was able to do it, people. So let's think. Let's really be intelligent beings, okay? And speaking of intelligent beings, I'm bringing Anna on here because, like I said, Dr. Kaufman. Can I call you Andy?
Yes, please do.
Cool. I want to create bridges. Okay, so Anna Maria, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. I don't know if you can hear me and see me.
I can hear you just fine. Cool.
Okay.
So welcome to our show. Glad to have you with us, and thrilled to introduce you to my new friend on the side of my face, Dr. Andrew Kaufman.
Yes.
Cool. So, Dr. Oliva, you and I have talked quite a bit. Anna Maria was the one who sent me your video. It was the first video, which was awesome. I appreciate it. Exosomes for us. We've never heard of this. We've had our head in a microscope for 40 years. And for people listening, if there's new people listening, the things that we've said, my dad did this for almost 40 years. We have over 60,000 images of blood in our database, and we've seen patterns over and over and over. So when I say some of these things, it's not what I think. This is what I know from experience. All right, Dr. Kaufman is having experience. People, who are you listening to? Are you listening to people firsthand that they're having the experiences, or are you listening to other people? Dr. Anna Maria has had experience. So, Dr. Oliva, say hello, and what would you like to chat about today? What can we talk about?
Hello, Adam. Hello, Dr. Kaufman. Yes, I'm very glad to be here. I appreciate a lot this opportunity, because when I watch your video talking about the exosomes and the PCR and all this stuff, I was thrilled, because, here in Spain, the mainstream is always thinking in pathogens, is always thinking in viruses, and blaming the outsides as the cause of everything. But I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an engineer. I'm a biomedical engineer, so I don't have this vision about pathogens. And when I did my PhD, that was in working with a microbiologist, I read that 90% of our cells are bacteria. And then I was reading a great scientist that we have here, that is Maximo Sandin, that he talks a lot about the viruses as builders of our bodies and as messages like telegrams that we are sending, and then our body is sending inside the cells and sending outside. So for me, it was very clear that the viruses and the bacteria are not the cause, but probably just part of life and are not the cause of diseases, are just there. Is like the typical analogy that we do, that when we find the firefighters in a fire, they are not the cause, they are the consequence of that there is a fire, and that's why there are firefighters. So we find bacteria, so it's not the cause, it's the consequence. So, and my reflection was, and I want to know your opinion about that. I think my camera today is so weird, but anyways, I want your opinion that this can happen, that since we've been trained to find, we are trying to find someone to blame about everything bad that is happening, and we've been creating this idea about the pathogens, and then you see an exosome, but you cannot think that this is something that is yours. You have to think that it comes from outside, so you have to blame it, because you cannot even think that it is part of the inner response of your body. And it's not so, we are just talking about the perspectives, the 6 and the 9, the exosome, the virus. Is it exactly the same? The only thing is that we have been putting names to each one of the sequences that this exosome has. So there is no real difference between one thing and the other. It's just the point of view. And it's the point of view that this has been created because we've been trained in thinking that there are things outside that are the cause of our diseases.
Well, Anna Maria, first let me say thank you for sending my material to Adam, and es un placer en conocerte.
Oh, gracias, igualmente.
De nada. So to address your question, you brought up a number of good points, of important points, and I want to go a little bit over what I think actually happened historically with respect to viruses. And I think the word virus, or the term virus itself, is problematic, because what virus really means is poison. And it's a term originally from Latin, and it's even been used to describe snake venom in the past. So it doesn't really fit the picture very well, and I think it makes things very confusing. But what happened is that before there was even the technology to see particles as small as what we call viruses now might be, they already had the idea that there was an unseen microorganism that was causing illness. And this was simply because they didn't see bacteria or fungi at the site of the illness, and they didn't really have any other ideas, perhaps. And they certainly weren't willing to look at their own medical treatment as perhaps the cause of the illness, and as in such cases as polio. But when the electron microscope came along, and now they were able to visualize really, really tiny things, but not alive like the microscope observations that you make, Adam. I assume you use a dark field or similar type of microscopy. The electron microscope can only visualize dead tissue.
Right.
So there were these like virus hunters that were raring to go as soon as they could see electron microscope images. And so what they did is they looked at like cells from people who had a certain illness, and they got the damaged part of their bodies, and they were looking for viruses. And what they noticed was that as cells get sick and die, that there are all different sorts of particles that come off the cell. And there were so many different types and of different shapes and sizes that they couldn't really characterize them certainly, because we're talking about it like in the 1940s and early 50s, when they didn't have molecular biology techniques like we have today, where they could use gel electrophoresis or sequencing genetic material. So they weren't able to identify one particle from another, and essentially they were about to give up on finding viruses at all, when I think it was in 1954 that Enders, who had won a Nobel Prize for different research, came up with a new procedure. And what he did was mix the body fluid or a sample from a sick patient with a cell culture of foreign cells. And with the cell culture, he mixed antibiotics and other chemicals, which also were toxic to the cells. So as he incubated the cell culture, he was able to show that there were damage to the cells, the so-called cytopathic effect. And he attributed that damage to an unseen virus in the body fluid sample that he mixed with the tissue culture. And this became the procedure to isolate viruses, although it's so strange because they didn't actually isolate a particle and say that every particle in this purified mixture are viruses. So that's been done for viruses, or what they call viruses, in bacteria, which are bacteriophages, or other similar organisms or fragments. Actually, really should call them particles or fragments, in other single-celled organisms like sea algae, for example, like Stefan Lanka, who you alluded to before about the legal contest for measles. He was the scientist who issued that challenge. Mm-hmm. And so he discovered a so-called virus in sea algae, and he was able to purify that and show, characterize the particles that were all uniform in a drop. But for all the viruses that are alleged to cause disease in humans, I'm not aware of one case where they've actually purified a viral particle directly from the body of a sick individual and then characterize that in some way, like pull out the genetic material and sequence it and look at what proteins are inside of the particle and on the membrane of the particle and such. But so they had the procedure to do that. They weren't able to do it successfully with human so-called viruses. But then about 30 years ago, some scientists did discover particles associated with human cells, in fact, being secreted by human cells. So they found the particles inside the cell and outside the cell. And they were able to do experiments where they purified these particles and did exactly what they would do if there really were viruses causing disease. And they purified the particle, then they extracted the genetic material, and then they saw what proteins were inside and on the membrane. And they saw that there were receptors that could target it for another part of the body. And that's what gave them, I think, the initial idea that they were involved in communication. And further research showed that exosomes occur in response to almost any illness, like an acute infection, exposure to toxins, radiation, asthma, cancer, after taking antibiotics. So many things induce our own cells to excrete exosomes. And then lastly, what exosomes are said to look like under the microscope is exactly the same as what viruses are described to look at under the microscope. So what I think really happened is that when they saw these particles and thought that particles were involved in causing illnesses, but never did the experiments to prove that what they were actually seeing was exosomes and perhaps some other kinds of cellular debris. And then later on, when we had more advanced psychiatric or scientific experiments in molecular medicine, molecular biology, they were able to do actually the old procedure that they had always used to purify the bacteriophages or the viruses and amoebas or sea algae, and apply it to exosomes and then purify them out and characterize them. And a really interesting thing happened when they started looking at the genetic material in exosomes, is that they found our own human sequences that are well known and established, from the Human Genome Project, but they also found sequences that they said were viral in origin. But of course, they've always gotten these sequences out of human tissue samples, and they never got it from a purified particle. So it could very well be that all of these genetic sequences that they put in this database that they say are viruses from day one really are actually our own sequences that we would find in our own exosomes. And that there's never was anything that comes from outside of our body that would be a separate entity, that really these particles are just part of our own biology. Now, I think it's also possible, and there's some research suggesting this, but it's not really been, it's kind of a burgeoning field, so the research has yet to been done. But I think it might be that we could actually exchange these exosomes with other people, or even perhaps other types of animals in our environment, in order to exchange information about the environmental conditions. But certainly there's no evidence to say that, giving someone your exosomes would make them sick. The only real experiments like that have done that, they have to inject it like into your brain directly or things like that, and of course, if you put any foreign substance that injected into your brain, you're going to make somebody or some animal sick. Yeah. So, it's not really a very good scientific experiment, but because you'd have to simulate the natural way. So I think, this was a really just a big misunderstanding, and that it will eventually come to light, even though it may take quite a bit of time. But it's such a key thing, because as long as we think there are unseen particles that can mutate and come from animals and invade us and make us sick anytime, we're going to be vulnerable to being controlled by our fear of that.
Yes. Important too is people are afraid now. Are we in a healing mode? We're in sympathetic. You're not going to get better if you're afraid and compromised. Don't be afraid, because the body can regenerate in amazing ways, just like the earth can. My dad talked about studies, and I haven't been able to find these, where they had developmentally disabled amputees, where they would have to keep refitting the prosthetic because their limb was growing back until they told them they couldn't do that. And then it stopped growing. So wow. Interesting. We know that some animals can do that. And I also think, and for you, Anna Maria, also, we know how much about this, the body. I think this is the perfect machine. And the more we know, the less we know. Anna, you've been studying and doing research, and in your field, do you know everything? The more you learn, what are you thinking? I
feel so ignorant.
We need to study this. And the other thing I was thinking is, as you say these things, I can appreciate scientists. I can appreciate people looking for answers, doctors that want to help people. There's a trigger word that's been around these last few years: bullying. Okay. Can we peacefully coexist in a way where we can do research side by side? Can I present you my research in a way where you're not going to just try to destroy it, that you're curious and interested in what's going on? And what I think is nice now is something like this. Like you're in New York, Dr. Kaufman. Anna's in Spain. I'm here on the West Coast. I know there are other people watching around the world, and we all have different pieces to the puzzle. We have different things that we can add to this picture, and we can really do this research foundation without walls. So I'm so excited about things like this. This is what I want to do. I just want to connect people with other people and then observe what happens. And for people listening, for doctors and scientists, please, as I'm pleading and begging, let's work together. Okay. What can we do with this? How can we show people? There are things around us that we don't see. Eileen was talking about magnetic waves. Anna is doing a lot of studies on electromagnetic frequencies and what's going on there. These things are around us, but to not be afraid and be able to work with this whole experience symbiotically. For people now listening, what can you do yourself too? Everyone microwaves their food. It breaks the chemical bonds and nutrients disappear. There's the experiment of take 2 plants, microwave your water one plant with the microwave water and the other with non-microwave water, and watch the microwave water plant die. That's not good for you. Okay, this is what we're feeding ourselves. The rice experiment that Emoto talks about, three things of rice in the jar. One you put hate on, one joy or love, and the other one you just ignore. And they're molding at different rates based on the vibration of the word. Children are doing this. It's awesome. As we talk about this, we have good people. We have good information. It seems obvious to me that we need to get together and share this information. And at some point, there have to be people that are true scientists involved in germ theory looking for something, and the tide will start to shift. I'm extremely optimistic about this, and I think that's why we're here right now. So the last few things I want to say, and Dr. Kaufman, you mentioned this, Anna, when we went to Spain, we saw the regenerative agriculture experience, okay? How nature can heal, how nature can take care of itself. My brother's friend did a documentary on the Eel River system, a dead river system. They removed the dams, the man-made experience, and all of a sudden the river is coming back to life. All right, we can see the shipwrecks in Lake Michigan or whatever. We can see the top of the Himalayas. The bison are coming back down to the ocean in Catalina. Nature is repairing itself, and we can do the same. So for people that are afraid, Anna Marie is a scientist. Anna, what was your recommendation at the end of your Richard Fluke interview? What should people do now to be healthy?
Well, I think that one of the most important things that we need to be is being in peace. Okay, human beings have something that is called consciousness and that is called will. And this is something that we need to remember. We have to keep the balance between information and focus. It is very good to be informed. We have to be informed about what is happening outside, because that's the reality that we're experiencing, and we need to know it. Otherwise, they are going to get the control on us. So we need to be informed, but we have to keep our focus. We need to focus all the time in what we want, and we need to decide what we want and not allow things that you don't want to happen. Don't allow that. Then, in a practical way, it's very important to walk barefoot. Okay, from electric point of view, we need to be electrically connected to the earth. So walk barefoot. That way you're going to get a lot of electrons that are the best antioxidants that are going to fill your batteries, your transferring potential. And if you can be under the sun and you receive the light, the far infrared from the sun that makes you feel warm, your body is going to be also coherent and your water is going to be organized. So look at how simple it is. Just walk barefoot, be in the sun, breathe, 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 and keep your inner peace and connect with the earth and with upside, because there is what we really are, an antenna between heaven and earth.
This is nice for me to hear a scientist, who says walk barefoot. And she would talk about the piezoelectricity that's created by the bones in the feet. So people walking barefoot, hugging a tree, not romantically. This is stuff that actually is good for your health. Oxygen is important to us. Take off your mask, go outside, play with your kids, have some joy. Okay. The other thing I was going to say too, is Dr. Kaufman talked with Eileen McCusick recently, the idea of entrainment. And Anna, you've seen this, the metronomes, when you see those 30 metronomes and they all start to line up. Well, in high school, girls that hang out together and their female cycles start to line up. There's one where they show 3 metronomes, and they take the one in the middle out, and these go weird, and then they put that one back, and they all come together. You can feel anger radiating off of somebody. You don't have to ask them anything, okay? Right now, and even, as Eileen said, chaotic states entrain to a stronger coherent signal. If we can stay grounded, we can really start to entrain what's going on. And this is what's happening too, is there's so much fear and confusion. This is what we're being entrained to right now, is that. I can feel it in my stomach. I'm affected, At the same time, we need to do some of these practices and experiment for ourselves. If you go out with your kids, take off the mask, have some fun. How do you feel? You feel great, don't you? Anna can measure that with devices. I can show you the difference in your blood. There's probably something Dr. Kaufman can do that can kind of show a change here based on joy. Dr. Emoto had a lot of following. He tried to do what he did with the water with the blood first to show us how emotions affect us. And at the end of his life, he created 650 million children's books. He presented at the United Nations, and what Michiko does is she travels the world to anyone that invites her to their school. She gives the books out. You can print them up online in all these different languages. And what they're doing is teaching the children that water has memory and that we are mostly water. So the children are being nicer to each other. And what's happening? This is our future. All right. So there's things we can do. Nature repairs quickly. The regenerative agriculture, we can grow our own food. In my mind, listen, people, if you could eat organic food, grow your own food, not have to go to the doctor, and be happy, wouldn't that be a wonderful life? So let's do it. This is what I've been doing. I'm not unhealthy. I'm not perfect. But I've seen these things work. My dad has proven these things. Other people have proven these things. Dr. Kaufman is investigating these things, and he's going to learn some wonderful things. And I really encourage people to share this information. Do not be offended if people are not receptive to it. We've been brainwashed for a long time. Dad would say, "You've been snookered." For the last 100 years. So I can't thank both of you enough for doing what you do. And Dr. Kaufman, my brother and I would love to be on your show and share the blood experience with you. And actually, before you leave today, I do want to ask you a question or two about that. And Anna, awesome things that you're doing too as well. So team symbiosis. Anyone that's listening, you're on the team. Okay, you can take care of your health. You don't need to go to the doctor, no matter what they tell you, most of the time. Educational purposes only here. But really, I encourage you to do your experiments. So with that being said, Dr. Kaufman, you got a chance to check out our book for a moment or two. I assume you've seen a few of our pictures. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on holograms in the blood.
Well, I knew there's a lot of different kind of information you can find in there, and I don't know. I don't have really a preliminary opinion, but
no pressure.
I think it's really fascinating, and I am familiar with some of the work of Barlando. I'm not sure if you know of him.
I don't know the name.
But he's a very interesting guy, and he actually studied with Naissance when he was younger. And so he has developed a technique whereby he can actually identify specific pleomorphic changes in the somatids, and he can glean from that where in the body the illness is.
Nice.
And it's very, very fascinating stuff. So, just looking at these images, and actually perhaps we should talk about some video for the documentary, because I think it's really powerful showing this. And it's shocking for physicians. Like, I can't wait for MDs to see what is going on in the blood when you can observe living cells, because they're going to be, astonished. I'm going to have to bring a sample of blood and the microscope to show them in person, because they'll think the video is doctored.
Yes.
That's how powerful this kind of stuff is. So I'm excited about that.
I'm curious too. It's interesting because My dad, in the 90s, he became well known for his cancer work in Mexico, and he had the head of a famous hematology department, I won't mention the names, come to him to see what he was doing because of the results. And my father put the live blood under the microscope, and the man refused to look into the microscope.
Wow.
He said, it's live. Why would I do that? And my dad said, you want to know why I get the results? The answer is in there. This is the head of hematology for a hugely well-known university. This man is in charge of teaching people. And he would not look. All right. So when you show people, it's amazing. We call it the horse and pony show. Take a drop of blood. My dad will tell you things about you that no one has ever known before. He was a funny guy, no filter. He would say he could tell you if you were molested at the age of 5 and whether or not you liked it. So I am anxious and excited. I would love to be introduced to people and myself. So if there's anyone that I'm gonna look up the name and check this out because I want to connect with people. Gaston Naissons changed my father's life. My dad went to visit him in Canada. My mother was there. It was awesome. And Gaston Naissons isolated the sympretite. You know about the symphretites or the symbionts or the bions, these little microscopic particles in the blood. That live cell analysis says they're fat particles, which is not true. He isolated one, injected it into a dead rat muscle. 30 years later, that rat muscle is alive in a jar. Pure life force, okay? And I asked my mom just the other day, I said, tell me about this. She said, yeah, it was a jar. It was weird. It was like, boom, 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 boom. This was alive in a jar. This is pure life force. And pleomorphism, this little thing will morph into bacterials and fungals in order to help us. This is what we did in our clinics for years. And this is something that needs to be acknowledged and studied. Right now, if people want to challenge us, you know what? Yeah, let's have a race. Dad always let's have a race. Dad always wanted to do this. Well, you give me a few patients and let's see what I can do with them. People would ask Dad, what's your cure rate? And Dad would say, I have a cure rate. And maybe it is a challenge. You've got something no one's been able to do anything with. We've worked with everything from AIDS to zits and improved quality of life in almost everything. Sometimes the body gets so damaged, there's only so much you can do. But the reality is we can regenerate if we support the body. The earth can regenerate if we support the earth. So I'm glad that you got a chance to look at some of our stuff. For people who haven't listened to us before, check out our website, bigelsenmethod.com. And there are images there that match x-rays, images that match sonograms, images that I've seen doctors just get quiet. They don't know what to say. So I'm thrilled. Read the book, Dr. Kaufman, share it with anyone you can. And I appreciate that so much. Anna has done that, and I'm so thrilled with all of that. And the last thing then too, and for people listening, Anna didn't say this one, turn off your TV because of all the negativity that's coming your way. Take off your shoes, go outside, hug a tree, play with your kids, get some joy. Start to learn to garden. Dr. Kaufman, I heard you mention smaller communities, developing this type of thing. And that's something you're looking into, you're learning about, yes?
Yes, absolutely. I just came back from a retreat, sort of modeling that.
Nice, awesome.
Awesome.
I have an osteopath actually in Buffalo that has a farm that he is converting right now to a retreat area. And he's looking for people to come help work on the farm symbiotically with the earth. And ideally, we're going to get him a microscope so we can look at before and after people are earthing, right? And a few other devices so we can gather data on this. I myself, I have some friends. We're learning regenerative agriculture. My friends have those. My friend has a farm in Spain, and he doesn't water it.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, why? He works with the land the same way we work with the earth. This is regenerative agriculture. I don't have to water the trees in the forest. They learn how the earth works. And the reality is, people, you can grow food without having to water it. So we can provide for ourselves food-wise. We can provide for ourselves health-wise, as far as terrain theory is concerned. So anything else, Dr. Kaufman, that you would like to add? This is a great conversation.
Yes, well, drink enough water.
No.
And clean water.
Yeah.
I recommend 1 quart per 60 pounds of body weight. and also eat real food, not chemicals, right?
Right.
And it is okay to treat yourself once in a while, but make sure it's once in a while.
Yes, Dad would say if you can't pronounce what's on the label, don't put it in your body. For me, I love milkshakes. Chocolate milkshake brings me joy. You out there too, you've earned a piece of cake. Don't eat the whole damn cake, is what we would say. And even the idea of when you've got a cupcake for a child, the amount of joy in that child as he's about to get that cupcake is so much more beneficial to his health than the sugar is detrimental to the health. So yeah, that's great. Water, wow, there's roots of the tree and there's leaves. We need oxygen and we need water. And I actually know people that have lived without food for extended periods of time. There's a wealth of information that is about to come out. It might take a little time for us to put it together and really group. I'm okay with that. I'm in a safe spot. And if nothing else, people, I hope you're thinking about what's going on and really looking to take care of yourselves. If we can spread away from cities and learn to take care of ourselves, there's going to be less toxic environments and more health. So onward and upward is what I can say. Yeah. Anna, is there any last thing you'd like to add to the whole experience?
No, I think that you have summarized many things there. And for me, we have to remember that we are not just a piece of matter. We are not just a body, that we have emotions, we have our mind, and we have our soul, or however you want to call it. So it is important to find the balance in all the aspects that are part of our life. So just not to be so focused in biochemistry, that I work with electricity, so I'm not focused at all in biochemistry, but many people are just concerned about this biochemical part of us. So let's try to remember that we are much more than that. And another important thing, if you allow me to say that, is that from an electric point of view, we don't finish in our skin. And this is very important, because once you realize that you don't have an electric skin or a magnetic skin that separates you from inside to outside, you realize that you don't finish. You don't finish at all. Your energy is being dumped with distance, but it doesn't finish. So that means that we need to start including the rest in us. We have to stop thinking in me as something independent and start thinking in us. And us includes you, includes the animals, includes the plants, and includes the earth. As far as you want to go with this us, but we don't finish here. We are much bigger than that.
Right. You got it. You got it. Well said. For people listening, I have homework for you, which I love to give. We did this at our clinics. A list of joy. Take out a piece of paper, write down 10 things that bring you joy. Calling a friend, taking a walk, listening to music, doing Qigong, doesn't matter. Life is going to keep happening to us, okay? And you deserve joy. We need at least 10 minutes every day. Michiko Hayashi says we have up to 80,000 emotional episodes a day, and 80% of them are negative. So we need to practice joy. All right. So this is the last thing I'll end on. Dr. Kaufman, give me one thing that brings you joy.
Oh, that's easy. It's my children.
Children, awesome. The children are the future, and me, I'm a teacher, a music teacher, elementary school teacher. Children are some of my best friends. They know what's true and they know what's not true, and they deserve to be happy and healthy and to live a life without masks on and see our smiling faces. That's important.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Anna, one thing from you. What brings you joy?
Singing.
Singing. Nice. Sing, people. Sing loud. Sing like no one's listening. I love to sing. I don't sing well, which is why I sing rock and roll, because you don't have to sing well to sing rock and roll. People listening, say hello and let us know what your joy is. Dr. Kaufman, your website, I would like to share here real quick. I think I typed it up. Yes. There we go. AndrewKaufmanMD.com. Anna Maria, we've had you on before. You can check out her as well. I encourage people to just look for good information and then share it with people, and do not be offended if your friends are not interested. It's okay. People are confused. People are in a different spot. It's not, I don't blame them. Okay. Just compassion, understanding, and let's all move forward as best as possible. All right. Team symbiosis. So that being said, thank you both for being here, and for people watching and listening, share it, and we'll see you sometime soon, hopefully. Smiling faces, everyone. All right. So thank you both. And